Hello and welcome into the backfield. I'm your host Connor Schaff, and today I will be going over what a 16-team college football playoff bracket will look like in a new series that I like to call Methodology Monday. Every week from now until the end of the college football season in January or February, I don't remember to be honest, we will be going over a new format that the college football playoffs could take on. Now, all of this is coming after a report we got today that the college football decision-making team between the commissioners have delayed the decision to decide whether to expand the bracket or not. So we're just going to go over a whole bunch of different brackets. This week we are going to go over a 16-team bracket. Next week we are going to go over the one that I think they are going to end up taking on, which is the 24-team bracket. I'll also go even more, give you a 32-team bracket, a 64-team bracket. We are going to get crazy here. So let's start off today though with our 16-team bracket, which I think is the second most likely possibility, assuming they change the format. Now, I personally think we should give the 12-team format a couple more years. I definitely think there are some things we can do to improve the 12-team format. I think, namely, making the quarterfinals also on home campuses. I think if you make that change to reward the top 4 seeds for getting the bye, then that would do a lot of good for the playoffs in the 12-team format. And at that point, I'm not sure you need to do too much to change it after that. So we are going to first start by taking a look at what a 16-team playoff bracket format would look like. And this is via Pro Football Network, and this is kind of just explaining why the Big Ten and the SEC, though apparently they now want the 24-team format, want this format. So the 4-4-2-2-1-3 format gives the Big Ten and SEC automatic bids for the college football playoffs. What does this mean? This means that the SEC and the Big Ten both get 4 guaranteed spots in the playoffs. Then the ACC and Big 12 get 2 guaranteed spots in the playoffs. Then the Group of 5 gets 1 guaranteed spot in the playoffs, which will turn into the Group of 6 as of next year, and then there will be 3 at-large spots. So this would pretty much make it so that the SEC and Big Ten are given full-blown priority over the other conferences. Obviously, there are pros and cons to this. Of course, these 2 conferences are significantly better at this point than any of the other conferences, but it does still not feel quite right to take a burden on the other conferences like this. And I think that we'll talk about it a bit later, but only one group of 6 team in this expanded format is silly to me. So the Big Ten and initially the SEC favors this format for multiple reasons. Obviously, it guarantees 4 teams from the conference to play in the postseason. However, the conferences are most excited to how they plan to use these automatic bids. Now, I don't think that this part will end up going through. This is what the proposal is, but I think they're not going to end up taking the power away from the committee. I think it'll just end up being the 4 highest ranked teams from the SEC and Big Ten, and so on with every other conference. But what the proposal apparently says is that the 2 teams that play in the conference championship game would receive the first 2 bids, but the teams finishing 3rd through 6th in the conference would hold play-in games to determine the other 2 programs playing in the postseason. This means more money, more exposure, and more games, which is a good thing and also not such a good thing. But I don't really think that part would actually happen. Honestly, I'd really like to see in the future us have championship weekend, the 1st seed playing the 2nd seed, the 3rd seed playing the 4th seed. Every single team plays 1 more game. I think that would be a very smart thing to move towards in college football. And I think that is honestly more likely to happen than this proposal here. But what I want to do first before this is go through what a prediction for the top 25 to finish the season. This will be a lot easier starting next week. That's why I'm waiting to do what I think is the most likely format until next week when we have a better idea of the playoff picture. But we're just going to go through this super quickly. I'm not really going to explain my opinions too much here. You can watch my my last couple videos where I go over my college football playoff predictions as well as my top 25 projections for the CFB. If every game that I think is going to happen over the next 2 weeks goes the way I think it will, this is what I think the committee will do. So Illinois at 25, San Diego State at 24 as the Mountain West champion, James Madison at 23 as the Sun Belt champion, Texas at 22, and Virginia at 21. Tulane at 19 as the American champion. They should have a asterisk by their name to show that they're the champion. Michigan at 19, assuming they lose to Ohio State. Vanderbilt at 18, assuming they lose to Tennessee. Arizona State at 17, USC at 16, Utah at 15, Tennessee at 14, assuming that they beat Vanderbilt. Alabama at 14, I have them losing in the SEC championship. BYU at 12 with them losing in the Big 12 championship. Notre Dame at 11, Miami at 10, SMU at 9 with them winning the ACC. If you want to see why I end up moving up SMU so much, go watch my video from the other day. It'll probably be attached at the end of the video, but we will see. You're also free to just go click on it, subscribe, and then you can see all the videos in one place. Oklahoma at 8, Oregon at 7, Ole Miss at 6, Georgia at 5, Texas Tech at 4 as the Big 12 champion, Indiana at 3 as the Big 10 loser, Texas A&M at 2 as the SC championship, as the SC champion, and Ohio State as 1 as the Big 10 champion. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions about that, but that's not really the focus of this video. It's more about what the bracket could look like. So you have this nice little bracket here that I will be using. So we'll start by filling in the 5 automatic bids. So we would have Ohio State as the Big 10 champion, Texas A&M as the SC champion, Texas Tech as the Big 12 champion, SMU as the AC champion, and Tulane as the group of 5 champion. And from there, we now have to go through and pick out the top 4 teams from the Big 10 and the SEC. So we'll start off with the Big 10. So we have 3 more teams to fill in. Obviously, Indiana makes it at 3. We have Oregon at 7. And then we have USC sneaking into the playoffs at 15. Because even though there are not 4 teams ranked in the top 15 for the Big 10, USC will still get an automatic bid for being that 4th Big 10 team. Then we have out of the SEC, we have Georgia as the 2nd SEC team, Ole Miss as the 3rd SEC team, and Oklahoma as the 4th SEC team. So 4 SEC teams automatically make it. I think that's a bit less of a stretch for the SEC this year. The SEC on the 12-team format has a very good chance of getting 5 teams into the playoffs. So then we have our second Big 12 team guaranteed. That's going to be BYU. I actually think BYU would technically be ranked lower, but I had to move things around a little bit for matchup purposes. Obviously, and I'll go ahead and just say it, Alabama obviously makes the playoffs. They would, where they're ranked, play Georgia, but obviously we wouldn't want a rematch in the first round, so we're going to avoid that and have BYU play instead. And then out of the ACC, the second automatic qualifier will be Miami. And this is kind of part of the big reason why I think that the 2 teams that make the championship game shouldn't be required to go, because in no world is Virginia a better team than Miami. So I don't think the ACC would want Miami to be the one going to the play, or want Virginia to be the one representing them in the playoffs. I think they would want Miami to be there. And then we finally have our 3 at-large teams, starting with Notre Dame. I actually think one of the big positives of this format, and I actually just thought I have a pros and cons section later, and I totally forgot to add this pro, is that it punishes Notre Dame for the fact that they aren't in a conference. And I think that is an incredibly important part of a college football playoff format. Notre Dame should be punished for the fact that they aren't in a conference. They should be required to only qualify through an at-large bid. The only advantage of the format we had last year, where we had conference champions getting the first 4, getting the top 4 seeds and first round buys, is just that, in the fact that Notre Dame there was no way that they could become a top 4 seed. I think that we should be punishing Notre Dame for not being in a conference, because it just should be the case. They either should join a conference or have to face the consequences within the playoffs for that. And then we also have Alabama, and our final team will actually be Tennessee. So a 9-3 Tennessee team will also make the playoffs as an at-large team. So what I wanted to do before I go through this bracket is go through the first 4 teams that missed out, this being Utah as the 15 seed. So Utah are actually the biggest team punished by the fact that 4 Big Ten teams get in, because even though Utah is ranked ahead of USC in my rankings, Utah would actually miss out because USC is guaranteed a 4th, the Big Ten is guaranteed a 4th spot in the playoffs. Now, there is a different kind of format that I've heard get thrown around for a 16-team format, which is actually a 5x5x5x1 format. And this format actually would get Utah into the playoffs because it would guarantee, it would put 5 SEC teams in the playoffs, 5 Big Ten teams into the playoffs, 5 teams from the Big 12 and the ACC in the playoffs, so they make up 5 spots, and that would also include Notre Dame, and then 1 group of 5 team. So that would end up seeing Utah get into the playoffs in that format. But then we also have Arizona State at 17, Vanderbilt at 18, and Michigan at 19. So those are the 4 teams that miss out first and foremost. And now we'll go through and predict this bracket just so you can see the types of games we'll get. So I have Ohio State, Tulane. Definitely something about this format is that it's really going to punish your group of 5 team. They're not really going to have any chance, assuming that they end up playing the 1 seed. So Ohio State's going to win that game. Then we have a game that we still have in our old playoff bracket being Oklahoma versus SMU. And I think Oklahoma is going to win that game. Then we have an interesting game, Georgia versus BYU. Obviously, the 5 seed typically would end up playing the group of 5 team in the playoffs. But in this format, that's actually does not end up being the case, which I honestly do like, in that the 5 seed is not rewarded almost as much as the teams on a bye are. But I still think Georgia would win that game. And then we have what is a very exciting game between Texas Tech and Alabama. I'm a big believer in Texas Tech, so I'm going to go with them. Then we have Texas A&M versus USC, which is also quite an exciting game. And obviously a big pro of this format, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second, is teams like Texas A&M do get a home game. How awesome would it be for Kyle Field to get a home game in the playoffs? And I do have Texas A&M winning that. Then we have Oregon versus Miami, which is a match that I already had in my last video. I have Oregon winning that. Indiana versus Tennessee, another pretty exciting game there. Like, these Big Ten versus SEC matchups, I think across the board would be very exciting. And I think Indiana would win that. And then we have Ole Miss versus Notre Dame. I actually had Ole Miss winning, or that's a total lie. I did have Notre Dame winning this game, and I'm still going to have Notre Dame winning this game. So then we have the quarterfinals, which are the exact same as the quarterfinals that I had in my last video. So I'll just run through these pretty quickly. I do have one change I made, but Ohio State beats Oklahoma. Texas beats Georgia, Texas A&M beats Oregon, and then I do actually have Notre Dame beating Indiana this time. I just think this Notre Dame team is really good, so I'm going to pick them. And then I still have Ohio State winning, Texas A&M winning, and Ohio State being the national champion. So let me know what your bracket would be in this format, but that's kind of less the focus of this video and more so the kind of matchups we could have, especially in the first round, and what it would look like. And I want to talk a bit about the pros and cons before we head out of this format. So I think some of the big pros, we talked about this before, every top 8 seed gets a home playoff game. And now I think, in my personal opinion, they should stick with the 12-team playoff and give the first round buys a home playoff game in the second round instead of holding them on neutral sites. I think that would be a massive success towards this 12-team format. But this one guarantees that all of the top 8 teams get a home playoff game. It also means that more good teams make the playoffs. I don't really think that Tennessee and USC and Alabama and BYU would look out of place in the playoffs. So why shouldn't we have these teams in the playoffs? They are teams that 100% would hold their own in the playoffs, so there's no reason not to have them. And it also lessens the impact of the committee to an extent. Obviously, I don't think that it's going to happen where there ends up being 4 locked-in teams based on standings. I think it's still going to be by the committee, but when you give a set number of teams for each conference, it lessens the ability for the committee to force teams into the playoffs, like like we've seen happen in the past. Now, there are definitely some negatives to this as well, and the big one is that it's just very, very favorable to the two mega conferences. And I think as a addition to that, it expands the playoff without adding any benefit to the group of 5 and the new Pac-12. It pretty much just makes that, like, I think it should at least have 2 group of 5 teams and bring down the at-large number to 2. Just because it's not fair at all to the group of 5 to only get 1 team in a 16-team playoff format. I also think that's why the 24-team format is probably a little more popular, because it will give all 10 conferences a guaranteed spot in the playoffs. So I definitely think that format is better than this format, and we'll talk about that format next week. But honestly, I still like the 12-team format better personally. I think as much as I would like to see more group of 5 teams in the playoffs, realistically, most years the group of 5 does not deserve more than 1 team in the playoffs. And at the end of the day, I think 1 team is the right number. And at a 16-team format, I think it's going to be really difficult to argue that they should only have 1 spot. At a 12-team format, I think it's much more acceptable. Now, there are a couple more things that I really don't like about this format, and the other big one for me is that it doesn't do anything to reward you for winning your conference, because now 4 teams out of your conference or 2 teams out of your conference are guaranteed to make the playoffs. For these big conferences, there is no benefit to winning the conference anymore. Why would you even want to risk playing in the conference championship at this point? At least in this current format, let's say Alabama are in a situation they almost certainly will make the SEC championship unless they lose to Auburn, which I guess is possible, but it's not hugely likely. Alabama could automatically make the playoffs with a win, but also miss out on the playoffs with a loss. Should a team like Alabama now have to miss a 16-team playoff for playing in the conference championship when there is literally no benefit to them playing in the conference championship game? There would definitely have to be some format. Maybe you say something like a team is not allowed to move down from their original spot for playing in the conference championship game. Something like that. I think that should be a policy even in the 12-team playoff. But we would have to see if that ends up being the case. And then the other one is it would allow up to 7 teams from either the Big Ten or the SEC to make the playoffs. Obviously, in the example I gave you, 6 teams from an individual conference made the playoffs. So 6 teams from the SEC made the playoffs. But I think that's an acceptable amount. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if what they do as part of this format is make it so that only 1 team per conference can be accepted as an at-large bid. So what would happen is that Alabama would get the SEC's at-large bid, Utah would get an at-large bid, and Notre Dame would get an at-large bid. So instead of the SEC getting 2 more at-large spots, it makes it so it is impossible for one conference to get more than 5 teams in the playoffs. And I think you would probably have to do something like that just to prevent 7 teams from one conference making the playoffs. And honestly, hypothetically, if Texas ends up beating Texas A&M in this kind of format, there would end up being 7 teams, because you would end up having Texas, you would probably still end up having Tennessee, you would probably still end up having, Texas would probably replace Tennessee, but in principle, you get what I'm saying. It would be quite a problem. But that's all I have for you today. Make sure to let me know in the comments down below what you think of the 16-team format, and let me know what format you think we'd be going with. Make sure to stay tuned next week and the week after on these Mondays that will actually end up turning into Tuesday my time to see another projection for what a bracket could look like. And make sure to like and subscribe and interact with the video in any way you can, because it all helps grow the channel. But I will end up seeing you guys next time, so have a good one. Bye.